Welcome to Talk Together. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for an evening of talking about Dungeons and Dragons. I am Rebecca Hare. I will be your host tonight, and I am chatting to Nathan from Reckless Attack. Nathan, we are so excited to see you. Can you tell, for those poor benighted souls who haven't come across you yet, can you tell us who you are? Why are you here? Why are you so fantastic?
Well, that is a lot of big questions and a lot of philosophical questions that could be, kind of strung very large or very small, but I'll start small. First of all, I am equally as excited to be here for whatever reasons that I am here, to be here with you, beloved Rebecca, and on this wonderful network. But I am Nathan. I'm the Dungeon Master for the Reckless Attack podcast. We're a 5th edition actual play podcast. We release every Tuesday. We have a lot going on. We are a podcast of friends, of frenemies, of intense world building, of collaborative storytelling, of character-driven narratives, of frogs, of intense, kind of like flavor, and also just people, high quality audio capturing people who are around a table playing a game, with all of the boring bits of that edited out. Is us. We're Reckless Attack.
Can confirm it is magnificent. Nathan's description made it sound amazing. It is that amazing.
Well, thank you.
That is just fantastic. And yes, there are a lot of frogs, but there are also a lot of all the other brilliant things as well. Right, I have a few bits of housekeeping and then we'll start rolling that dice to ask those questions. So before we kick off, the stream will run for about an hour. We'll see how distracted we get. I'll try to keep it to an hour. We are, as always, delighted to be sponsored by Hero Forge, Ultra Pro, and Elderwood Academy, and to be supported by D&D Beyond, Warriors of Waterdeep, and Level Up Dice. You can find us as Roll Together RPG on pretty much all social media. And as always, a huge thank you to our D20 Club, our beautiful dice heads on Patreon. Our shows are available as podcasts as well. Just search Roll Together RPG on your favorite podcasting app. And you can now check out our fan-made wiki and our fan Discord if you would like to join us. Our wonderful mods, I'm sure, have suddenly magically popped those links up. Yeah, the wiki's amazing.
Fan-made wiki, I've been like I tried to build one ahead of time, and I did a little bit for the players just because we had a whole collaborative world building section, and we could talk about that if we want, if it comes up. But then I tweaked it a lot. And so there's a lot of information. And I kind of started putting a wiki together, and it's like, this is a lot of work and my brain doesn't really work with this kind of work. So I've always been very secretly desirous of like, well, if we just happen to get big enough that someone wants to make a fan wiki of our stuff, I guess that's fine. But fingers crossed still. So good for you guys. What a milestone accomplishment.
It's completely incredible. We had the same. We were having enough overlap between campaigns that we were starting to ask our DMs, can we just have some kind of shared doc where we can see who that player was, who's an NPC over here? And everyone was going, yes, at some point. And then I think, I'm so sorry if this is wrong, I'm pretty sure it was Twitch user Troutworthy who decided to just make one. And then everyone's pitched in and made pages. And it's incredible. My favorite bit is there's a graphic that shows how all of the different players like link between campaigns and in the different universes, and it's a thing of beauty. It's wonderful.
I'm not fishing for anyone, but if anyone who has contributed to this project and is now interested in Reckless Attack wants to just like lay the groundwork, I mean, I'm not asking for it necessarily, but wink.
I mean, I think, that is fair. You don't ask, you don't get. Before we do too much fishing, so also just fish away. Fishing is good. Shall we roll the dice and start asking
Bring it on.
About you? Or I'll just carry on talking about us, and that's less interesting, I think.
No, okay. Talk about me and the podcast.
Yeah, that's better. Oh, okay. This is a great question to start with. It is a 7. Ooh. And that is there a moment in a TTRPG that has impacted your life out of game?
This was this was a fun, I did a lot of, kind of like thinking ahead of time and prep work. And this is one that I really...
Nathan, we don't give you the questions in advance. This is completely spontaneous.
In that case,
no, I'm kidding.
This is something I've thought a lot about in my life and just happened to have this perfect anecdote prepared and ready to go.
Coincidence.
Yeah, exactly. But I really enjoyed this particular idea because we also do an interview portion of our podcast as well. I didn't talk about that. I guess I should talk about that more, but every couple of weeks, we feature a TTRPG creator or creators or a member of our cast just to talk about kind of similar questions as this. And I really like asking this question too. And I hadn't really turned it on myself yet. But for me, it is not kind of the same traditional question of like, oh yeah, I had this moment, or we confronted this idea and I thought more about it. For me, this was my answer is the end of our last home campaign with the Reckless Attack group. COVID had hit. We had put a pause on our campaign. We had played together for years and decided, hey, we're just ready to get started on podcast stuff. So like, this is an okay stopping point. Let's pause here. Maybe we'll pick it up one day. And COVID hit, so we didn't do a podcast for a long time because we wanted to do it in person, at least the first few episodes. Yeah. And so we're like, hey, we still want to play though. So like, let's pick it back up. Let's end it. So we did it over Discord, and it was a little weird because no face-to-face stuff is very different and no video is very different. But we ended the campaign, and that was something I haven't ever done for any homebrew I've ever run or anything I've ever run. And it's something I've only done as a player one time, and that was like a book. We're playing through one of the official modules that we might talk about later. But I had all these great, like, intense plans for what the end was going to be. It was super emotional. It was one of the players, their estranged dad was the big bad evil guy. It was necromancy. It was like super character drama, backstory, all these threads coming together. High level NPC friend had been kidnapped and blah, blah, blah. And there's going to be like intraplanar travel and like all this other thing, and classic player experience. They messed it all up. I don't know. Can we do cusses on here?
Yes, this is not a PG.
Fucked it all up. And they know they did, because I told them what I was going to do, just because it was fun to talk about. Because then they basically just confronted the boss early and ambushed him and all that kind of stuff. And it was totally good and whatever. But the way that they did it was very public. And he was also the head of this city, so he was like a public official, and everyone knew he sucked. But like, there was all this political tension and yada yada, and they basically had to run away and leave the city immediately after, which is not like a hero moment, right? You want parades, you want all this stuff, and all that came.
Were they at level 20 at this point?
No, they were level like 13 or 14 maybe.
Okay, but still high enough. You don't want to be running away from a city with your tail between your legs.
Right, exactly. And like, no one wants that. And even if you were level 20, it's like, well, are you going to murder all these like, villagers who are like, hey, hold on, you just did something. But it was so there's this weird almost anticlimactic thing where the whole party wasn't even together. Someone had been trapped in a force cage. It was a whole thing. There was the Book of Vile Darkness was involved, and the wizard character, who was morally gray, wanted it for himself because he, obviously it's very powerful. And there's all this like weird intra-party tension and conflict. And they had to, again, like escape through like the alleys basically to leave the city so they didn't get caught kind of doing a political assassination, sort of. It's more complicated. But so it was all rushed. It was all weird. Someone almost died. Like they had the soul, the bad guy had their soul like in their hand and all kinds of crazy stuff. And it all culminated with a fireside chat at the end of the day, where it was them, it was some of their NPCs, and tensions were high. And the vibe was like, we have grown. We started as very different people, and we grew into more different people. And this might be one of the last times that our characters are together, like as a party. We all have our own new lives now. We have our thing over here and here that we've built over the adventure. And there's all this tension, and we didn't have the kind of heroic victory that is kind of the classic ending, but the characters just went to made a fire, and they camped out, and they just talked in character for like 30 to 40 minutes. It was incredible. They did it all in character. They just talked through the stuff, and it was just this moment of catharsis of we did it. And there was not the big like fireworks when it happened. And so they made their own we did it, and their own oh, it's over kind of moment. And it was perfect. It was so incredible. And so my answer ultimately to get to it is to trust players, right? And to trust your invested players, but also to be okay with searching for meaning and closure as you get it, as opposed to planning for it, if that makes sense, where you take the circumstances that are afforded to you and the weird boss fight that wasn't supposed to happen and this weird anticlimactic stuff, and just examine it for what it is and find meaning in it instead of going in with kind of preconceived meaning, if that makes sense. And I had learned that lesson a little bit, but that was like a perfect distillation of here's what happened, and now what does it mean? Instead of having meaning that you're going for necessarily, and being okay with taking events and facts and happenings as they are. And that has really stuck with me.
That's such a good story. That final game sounds so stressful and so magnificent in so many ways.
It was nuts. Yeah, it was incredible. It was, again, I had so many other things planned, so many, again, like intraplanar things, and people were going into, mindscapes and all these other sort of things and confronting these like huge badness. Nope. They just like killed the bad guy out of his like evil wizard tower, and they had to escape, but then it was perfect.
That's amazing. How long was that last game? How many hours did you run for?
I don't remember exactly, because it was my party then and now has a habit of stringing together encounters. If I allow them, right? Where if there's even a small possibility that they can combine two encounters into one encounter, not on any purpose of mine or anything, they will do it. They will find ways. They don't mean to. They don't do it knowingly. They just do. And they'll always be like, we just had this boss fight. The boss escaped. All this other crazy stuff happened, but we got to go into the next fight. We got to get him right now while he's like, and so I was like, okay, sure. If that's what, but so the whole kind of like narrative scope of the battle and like kind of end was, I think, over 2 sessions, but the like, let's chase him through the city. Let's, talk about what we want to do. Let's beat him and let's go to the camp, I think was kind of your usual like 3 to 4-ish long, but like, full robust session. And then we, of course, then talked for like 40 minutes afterwards to be like, oh my God.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Because you were DMing that one.
Yes.
Are you sort of a forever DM?
Yeah, definitely. And I love DMing. I love it a lot. It is, I think part of it is that I've had a lot of, we'll call them only okay player experiences. Because, a great DM makes a great campaign, and also great other players make a great campaign. And I've had kind of a limited amount of those for my like long-term games. I've had, or at least certainly not in a while. But yeah, DMing scratches a lot of itches for me personally. And as I'm sure you know, or anyone who plays tabletop role-playing games knows, it's easier to play a game if you're the one willing to DM. Because sometimes people want to DM, but also if you're talking to other players who have DM'd and you're like, hey, I will DM you, everyone will be like, great, that's awesome. I would DM, but like it'd be great to just play. So I often try to use that as leverage to get to play with cool people and play games at all, to be like, well, I'll DM, sure, that's fine. But also I love it. Like, it's cool. It's so cool, the experience of DMing. And it's such a singular opportunity to have focus and creativity and be like a puppet master and, kind of pluck on this string over here and be like, oh, I see this person hasn't had a moment in a little bit. And so like, let's bring them in. And that's such a cool experience. And then outside the table, getting to just like sit and create and scheme and brew is like my favorite pastime, period.
It does sound really Machiavellian in the best possible way when you describe it like that. It's great.
It is. It's cool. I've DM'd now just enough where I can just sit at a table, not universally, and especially like I'm biased because I've been playing with my players for like 4 years or something like that. So I know them and I can feel it to a certain extent. But it's fun when I'm in the zone and we're all on the same page and I can just like prod people just enough to poke them in this direction or that direction, or be like, how's your character feel about this? And then that launches this whole thing. And just kind of have that overarching view of the table and kind of that meta view of like, how's it going? And like, how can I pivot this, or how can I just tweak it to make it a little smoother or better? Or like, ooh, that's an interesting idea. File that away for later. It's such a cool experience and something that I love doing for certain. So yeah, DMing is like, if I could be a forever DM or a forever player, I'd pick forever DM.
Wow, that's bold. Good to know. I'll bear that in mind next time I need to DM.
Yeah, right, exactly. And like, I know that's a dangerous thing to say, but also like,
you've said it on the internet now, Nathan.
I know.
You'll never be allowed to play ever again.
And no one lies on the internet. No
Ever.
One things don't change.
We're all completely honorable and honest people.
Exactly. Schedules and bandwidth never change. Yeah, exactly.
You said a great DM can make a great game. What for you makes a DM properly great? Yes. I'm not even rolling the dice on this question. I just want to ask you.
Yeah. So
I'm cheating.
For me and my personal enjoyment, and there's a lot of great DMs and a lot of great DMing styles and a lot of things that I enjoy. But I think for me, what is the coolest feature for a DM, and one that I try really, really hard to have, is a DM who gives players things to react to. Mm-hmm. I like pain, I like joy. I like heroic opportunities. I like NPCs. I like moral quandaries. I like, if I'm a paladin and I have an oath and I don't get a heartbreaking opportunity to confront this, in game, what are we doing? That is what I crave. I love that. And I love DMs who think in terms of not just, I have this cool adventure planned, which is great, but I have a cool adventure plan that directly is going to poke at or elevate or crush or whatever a player or a couple players or the whole players, and give them the opportunity to pull inside themselves and pull inside their characters to discover something and to express something. And DMs who work actively to create that sort of environment and create those sort of opportunities that's like catnip for me. Like, yep, all day, every day. Again, give me more pain, give me more joy. Like, we'll do it. Absolutely. Give it to me. Watch other people do that. Like, bring it on. Absolutely.
I think my very favorite thing about that answer is you have somehow articulated exactly my favorite things about a DM, which I have not managed to articulate nearly as well. Yep. All the pain, all the joy.
Yeah, exactly.
And then an adventure along the way is also pretty great.
Right. And like, that's not for everyone. And a lot of people like showing up at tables, right, and just like doing it and slamming out the adventures and just having fun with friends. And I do too. I have, during COVID, had a game that was just that. It was just as simple as like, let's get together and kill monsters and hang out and chat. And like, that's great. Really valuable too. But yeah, when it's really clicking, That's what it is a player or as a DM who's like in your face with stuff that your character can react to and can interact with, and not just in a like player choice kind of way, which is great, but emotionally, intellectually, philosophically kind of push against or be swept up in.
Sounds fantastic. I will stop cheating and I'll actually roll the die for this next question. So what do we get? That is a 15. Ooh, I guess if you're a forever DM, this may be harder, but where do you start when you're making a character?
Yeah. So I have played some.
I have played with you. I know you played
recently, as you know. But I think, and I can talk a little bit about NPCs too. But when I start making a player character like built thing, truthfully, I start with what everyone else is doing first. I am a player and a DM who really tries to emphasize different characters having different specialties and flavors, right? And not stepping on that in the least. So I am unable to pick an ancestry, a class, a flavor, any of it until I know what everyone else is doing. Like I am just paralyzed with indecision, anxiety, and a desire to please. So I can't. Like I need to know what your flavor is. If you have some skills picked, that'd be really helpful. And like what's kind of your whole deal and backstory. So like I have to know that first. I can't not know. Because I am so worried that I will, oh God, you picked a bard, I picked a bard. It doesn't matter that they're different bards. Oh God, I'm so sorry. But after I have my options narrowed, I like looking at the lore or the adventure or the hook or whatever information that we have. And I ask what's the thread I can pull on here? And what's interesting, what questions arise about this world, about this adventure that I can answer or provide more questions to. So when you and I played together on the Check These Out stream, it was this cool, intercontinental ancient struggle against dragons where there was ancestral titles being passed down as like, I am the dragon foe, essentially. And I watched the dragons. And so for me, my question was like, okay, cool. But like, so they have all these people who are helping them. So, and it's like, it's ancient and blah, blah, blah. So like, who might help what does it look like to be a helper who's not just a person who has like a job and a role? And so yada, yada, yada. I came up with this like order of tree people basically who served as guardians, as guides, as spiritual advisors. And partway through that is kind of the third aspect of this of then I say, okay, what's the flavor? What's the interesting thing? And a lot of times that is where a class or ancestry or flavor or whatever will stem from. Just kind of starts falling into place from there, basically.
Oh, I suppose we can maybe squeeze a few more questions.
I guess.
But yes, we've got our wrap up sorted. Oh, okay. This is number 6, which is how did you start playing TTRPGs?
Yes, it is a weird, winding journey.
It always is.
Yeah. I do not remember how I heard about like where I became like conscious of D&D. Really. I listened to a lot of podcasts, but I don't think that I really listened to them before I was like introduced. So the first time I played D&D was in college. Surprise. But I was a journalism minor in college, and in one of my classes, one of our assignments was to go out into a subculture that you're not familiar with. So like a music scene, a whatever it was, and write a story about it and like kind of ingrain yourself into that area, talk to people, learn about it, whatever. And I, being the nerd that I was, chose D&D. So I went to a local gaming shop. And I'd never been there, never stepped foot, never anything. And this was during the 4th edition days. and just went in a little early, talked to people kind of as they came in, and just watched people play for however long. And that is actually how I met one of my players in Reckless Attack.
Amazing.
Steve. He was just happened to be a player there that day. And then the next week I came back also a little bit early, and someone very kindly met with me early and built a character for me to play, which was awesome. And so I got to play through, and I don't remember if I played 1 or 2 sessions, but I was only there for like 2-3 weeks tops. And was immediately like, oh, this is interesting. And then yada yada, a lot, some like little one-shot things here and there with other nerd friends, and a lot of podcasts. I got very into podcasts. I was commuting heavily at the time, so I listened to a lot of podcast content. I met my first actual recurring DM in a coffee shop I was working at. He was a regular there. Steve, he's like other Steve, not Reckless Attack Steve. And it was always just a lovely customer. And I worked brunch hours, so I just got like inundated with people, like 100 people or whatever a day. And he always stood out as like, just a lovely soul. And he was there one day and he was working on his laptop, and we just got to chatting. I think it was after my shift. And I asked him like, what are you working on, or something along those lines. And he was working on the monster manual for 5th edition. His name is Steve Townshend. You can open up your monster manual, and I believe Princes of the Apocalypse. He did some work on, I think, the Air Temple of that, and also a bunch of other adventures, and like I think Dragon Magazine and some other stuff. And we just he was like kind of bashful about it, because assuming that no one, 5th edition obviously hadn't come out yet. D&D had not exploded in the way that it has exploded today. So he was very just like, no big deal, chill about it. And I was like, no, but wait, no, I do know that. And I am excited about that. And he eventually invited me and my now wife into one of his games. And it was very instructive. It was very different and very narrative. He was a theater person. And a writer, and so had been playing for forever, and so had very kind of like specific ideas and approaches that were very, very different than what I had experienced, but was really cool. And then that was like the final straw, where it's like, I'm just going to be playing D&D as much as I can all the time for forever. I put my roommates and then girlfriend and now brother-in-law through, a whole terrible first campaign, including a brutal 6-hour one shot at the beginning. Because when they tell you it's a one shot, right? It's like, oh, it's a session. And like many new DMs was very bad at like reading the room. And it's like, well, no, we're supposed to finish it. And so we did, and it was a horrible mistake. And I almost never got them to play D&D ever again. I had to convince them like, no, I'll do it better this time. But then, we kept going, and we kept getting better, and I kept getting better. And that is just kind of how, and here we are today, yada, 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 Reckless Attack, a 5th edition actual play Dungeons and Dragons podcast.
That's amazing. Can you remember what that very first character that was rolled for you was?
Yes. So it was a Goliath, I want to say barbarian. And I very distinctly remember it for a lot of reasons, but my most specific memory, and this was, again, it was a game store game, so limited in many ways, for reasons we don't need to get into, and I'm sure many other people have gotten into here on your show. But I remember there was a roper or something on the ceiling and dangling, and I didn't have any ranged weapons. And so this huge, beefy, hulking barbarian had to parkour up stalagmites to try and athletics check, jump, and hit this thing out of the air. And it worked a few times. But so that image is burned into I don't remember his name. I don't remember anything. Again, I played him maybe 2 sessions. But that image is so forever burned into my brain that I will remember that forever.
Sounds amazing. I have never played a Goliath, but I should. They seem like a lot of fun.
They're fun. It's a lot of, and again, it's 5e and it's also 2022. So like, ancestral racial flavors, kind of like, it is what you want it to be. But it's a lot of cool ideas of like the importance of competition and of bettering yourself and of like all this very intense anime-esque, mindset, which is just very fun to play with. And like, who doesn't want to be just like a very large, beefy person, right? Like that's all it's just great. It's so fun.
I've spotted that without planning to, I always play small, and I need to just start playing some Loxodons, some Goliaths.
I not always, but like usually go beefy. But that's also because I usually play classes wherein beef is useful.
Yeah, I'm rolling a new fighter really soon, so maybe I'll try the Goliath or someone slightly bigger than my usual kind of gnome vibe. Right, shall we roll the dice now, Nathan? I should tell you, I am meant to be going roll that die, and I just can't bring myself to do it because it physically hurts me. So I'm just rolling it. So you are missing out on a key part of the talk together
on
experience.
The hype. Got it. That's all right.
So sorry.
It's a vibe. I appreciate it.
This is an 18. It is one of my favorite questions. Nathan, what is the best villain you have ever faced in the game?
Yes. So it's interesting. Again, as a forever DM, I haven't really faced that many. In terms of ones that like, if I thought about it, maybe I could kind of come up with some. But like a lot of the longest running campaigns that I had kind of were more about the vibes and more about the kind of like the struggle and not the destination, if that makes sense. Like there was no Strahd central whatever figure to a lot of the games I've played in. But one thing I really loved is during COVID, some of my internet friends and I were playing a lot of one-shot systems just to kind of mix things up. And we played the Alien RPG, so like the one based on the movie franchise. And we played a couple games, and the DM for that was a big fan of the franchise, and that can go either way. It can be great or it can be terrible. It went amazingly. So one of the great things about playing in those sorts of branded themed games is you get to experience the movie, basically, right? You get to do the thing if you're playing a Lord of the Rings thing and you get to see friggin' Aragorn or something, you're like, this is the coolest thing that's ever happened. Right, that's what you want. That's the satisfaction that you desire. And he delivered both. The first adventure we got to, it was very Aliens, where we were in a remote base. There were aliens hatching. There was an evil android who was like a double agent. And that was a really cool, and there's intrigue is like, wait, we didn't know that this guy was an android, and like yada, yada, classic stuff. And then the second adventure, our, ship got taken over by like an alien. And so like we had to do the whole like sneaking around the vents. We were also all playing kids. There is a player class that is child, basically. It's like mute. And without telling the DM, and it was cool. Don't do this at home, kids. Do it only in groups that you trust and in a nice way. We didn't tell the DM, but all of us made child characters just in the child class. Every one of us.
Oh damn, that's amazing.
And we explicitly said, do not change this adventure. Like, don't do a thing. We don't want any extra work on your part. But we are all children, and we just want to see what happens. And it and like definitely, if we had a gun, that would have been useful for a lot of the adventure and a lot of other things. And they're all the same class, and so like they had very similar skills, yada yada. But sneaking around the vents and knowing that like. In a classic Alien movie franchise sense, that like we're not the Space Marines, we're not any of these other things, we're not playing the shitty corporate executive, we're playing kids who are the most helpless at all of this situation, and all we can do is is lightly push things here and there to get the outcome that we think we want, alerting adults to the problem, or sneaking away from the alien, or trying to lock in someone, was really, even beyond kind of the basics of, cool, we're playing alien, there's an alien, oh my God, that's cool. It weirdly played even more into the vibe, especially of Alien, where it's like, there is nothing you can do. Like, if you step out in front of anything, you will die. It will be gruesome. It will be bad. My own adorable child was horribly eviscerated by an alien. And which we knew, of course, that was going in, like we had mentally prepared, like we know what we're playing. But it really perfectly captured the vibe, right? Where like it's a genre piece and we hit the genre on accident by being goofy children, but like helpless, goofy, having to be creative and scared and cautious kind of thing. And the DM perfectly played both of those to like ramp up the tension, make it feel believable, make it feel dangerous, and be dangerous all at the same time. So that was a really, really memorable experience for me.
That's amazing. And games are always so interesting when you can't, for whatever reason, do I hit it with my sword until it's dead. I am a hero.
Exactly.
Oh,
like we had it's the kit is really funny because it's very like quick starty, which is awesome. But it's like, you get, like a remote control car, and you get like a walkie-talkie, and like that's the kind of stuff that you are getting as your tools. Whereas like a Space Marine is like, you get to choose a giant assault rifle or a bazooka. And it's like, okay, well, I see where that would have been useful, but like, yeah. So we had to Home Alone it basically through an alien, and it went okay until it did not go okay. But even then, it kind of went okay.
I never knew that cool. Home Alone and Alien was the mashup I wanted, but yeah,
that's what it was. It was fabulous. It was really fun and stupid and great. And again, and it also perfectly balanced the humor, that you need in horror, and the horror, and the DM was really, really great about letting all of that coexist all at the same time and making it feel authentic and real. And so like I get to say that I was eviscerated by an alien, and like that's pretty cool, actually.
What more do you want out of life?
Yeah,
really?
It was great.
So, I mean, that's amazing, but also I'm just really nosy. I want to know, as a DM, what's then the best villain, going all the way back, that you've made or you've thrown at your players, maybe on Reckless Attack?
Yeah, so I do, without going too much into it, I really do like the setup for the current villain that Reckless Attack has. Very mysterious, very like background, has not really interacted directly with the party or anything like that. But I am very excited knowing what I know about them, and my party is already very, like they latched on in the way that you hope as a DM to be like, well, wait, we don't really know who that is, but like, who is it? And like, tell me, and like, that's interesting. And like, what does this mean? And yada, yada. So I'm really excited for that. I already talked a little bit about the last villain in the big campaign that I ran. The adopted, or like the half father of one of the PCs, who was also like a governor of a city and playing politics, and also an evil necromancer, and like could individually pluck all the strings of all the party to get what he wanted, and to be untouchable in a lot of ways, in kind of the perfect, what you want all your villains to be. You're right. You want them to be dangling in front of your players, be like, I'm right here. Stop me. I know you can't. It doesn't matter what you do, because you're peasants. You are weak. And I am so well protected by my own power, by power structures, by all of it, that like you can't just murder me in the middle of a party. It wouldn't work. And like I would probably kill you anyway. And so that turned out really fabulously. In terms of like individual, I really like building my adventures and arcs around like or phenomenon. One that my party still talks a lot about is a monster, I think from 3rd edition, called an orkwart. I encourage everyone to Google it. Pause the stream or in your other window or whatever. Google it. I don't think they've remade it for 5th edition other than homebrew stuff. It is a living tree, but not in the kind of Ent sense. It is a tree with roots that matriculates and like has horrible walking tentacly roots. But what makes it horrifying beyond that is that it has the ability to grow pod people, that it drops like however many of them who go into nearby villages and abduct people and drag them back to the tree where the tree eats them. And I gave it a couple other fun little abilities of this spooky fog, yada, yada. But it was just this horrible monstrosity that was just this supernatural phenomenon. There's no talking to it, no nothing. It was a force of nature, and it showed up and it just decimated villages, right? And the party, in classic fashion, strained together a bunch of encounters and went into the deep enchanted forests that no one went into, because you don't go into deep enchanted forests. Who does that? That's suicide. Everyone knows that. And they went in and they faced this thing and they almost all died. And that was a really memorable example of a monster having a lot of personality without having a personality, So everyone Google an orkwart and put that in your games. It's great.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, they sound terrifying. My DMs, don't put that in your games. That sounds horrible.
Do it.
Right, I will roll the die again. That is a 15, which we've already had. While I re-roll, Nathan,
yes.
What is your deepest, darkest secret?
My deepest, darkest secret, I would say, it's like, what's the right deepest, darkest secret, It's like not what's your one, but like what's the right one in this context to
for
share.
the internet to share.
Yeah, exactly. And in this otherwise like lovely conversational stream. I would definitely say my deepest, darkest secret is the amount of anxiety and worry that I have around other people liking me and approving of me and saying that, I'm doing a good job, or I'm doing the right thing, or my kind of reputation in the eyes of others is something that I have a lot of struggles with, and something that I am working very hard in therapy. Go to therapy, orkwarts and therapy, guys. That's the takeaway. To kind of work through and that kind of stuff, but it's still very much there. And also the very classic, like, this person hasn't said a nice thing to me in a day, and they've said a nice thing to someone else, and they probably don't like me anymore. Like, having to beat that down in my brain constantly is, I wouldn't say it's a deep, dark secret, but is something that is not apparent for the kind of like outgoing, effusive personality I have and try very hard to bring to the forefront frequently.
Yeah, that's fair. I imagine you are not the only person watching this who can relate to that one. I don't think you're the only person on this Zoom call who can relate to that one. I mean, other streaming video conference is available.
On wherever, totally.
But how does that interact with putting yourself out there so much with a podcast, being in the TTRPG space, people knowing who you are? How do you find that works?
So far, okay. I've been very lucky, and we were talking about this a little bit before, but Reckless Attack has gotten a lot of really wonderful feedback, and it is already succeeded well beyond what we had hopes, certainly, and our standards and our dreams were to put out a good podcast that people would listen to and become the greatest podcast to ever exist, right? Like, that's what we wanted to work towards, or like what our fun standard idea of like ensuring that we're working hard and taking this seriously. That was our goal. And we've been surrounded by so many amazing people, and so many people who have been not just supportive of the podcast, but supportive of us as people and as creators and as just online presences, I guess you could kind of call us now. And so I think having not exclusively, but almost exclusively nice people saying nice things is always a good place to start when combating that. But of certainly a lot of people who do the like frequent, like, hey, you're cool, just drive by, hey, you're cool, kind of things on the internet, but also seeing a lot of, work in therapy and outside of that, but also seeing, like you said, seeing so many other people talk about it and acknowledge it, and normalizing talk about mental health wherever you're at, whatever you're struggling with or burnout or whatever is really important to me personally. In part because I certainly struggle with a lot of anxiety, of depression, of all kinds of imposter syndrome, burnout, you name it, the usual online presence kind of laundry list, right? But also several years ago when I was in college, my younger brother committed suicide, and I found a lot of healing and a lot of value in being very, what's the right word to say? Being very transparent, both me personally and other people as well. I was, at the time, I was a senior in college, and I was the editor-in-chief for the school newspaper. And I, took a week off, and everyone was so wonderful. Like, all my professors, responded the way that you hope they would respond, and everyone took care of me, and it was really beautiful. And I got to come back, and I had a regular column that I got to write. And so I had just enough space, and I was trying to be, like, kind to myself and not pressure myself, and no one pressured me to do it. But another student on campus, while I was gone back home, had actually committed suicide while I was gone. And it was obviously a very big topic on campus. And so I decided to write a personal kind of column and experience of just like almost a semi stream of consciousness, whatever, that thankfully turned out well. But that's all to say, because I wrote that and put that out there, so many people came out of nowhere who had never spoken to, or didn't know well, or didn't know this about them. So many people came out and said, oh yes, I also knew someone who died by suicide. And, I experienced this or whatever, or had an attempt or whatever. And, in the years since, I had another friend whose sibling committed, or died by suicide, excuse me. And we got very involved in fundraising stuff for suicide prevention. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. It's a good place if you need to go check it out. They have resources. They do research. They do lobbying, all kinds of good stuff. Again, this is all to say that me personally, and it's different for everyone, being comfortable with talking about it and talking about mental health and talking about all of it that so many people struggle with has been super healing for me, and super healing, I think I've heard from other people, or at least super useful to destigmatize talking about it, right? And because if it's a shameful thing, if it's a thing that you don't know that there are resources for, or don't know that people use these resources, or that they're good, kind, gentle resources or whatever, that it's so difficult. Mm-hmm. It's so difficult to make change, and so difficult to save lives, right? And to improve lives or whatever. And so that I think for me has been really being exposed on the internet. And this is a crazy thing, and like speaks to the quality of community that we've just like fallen into. but to have a collection of people on the internet who are very, not exclusively, but many, who are very, very open with whatever they're struggling with that day, who are very open about like, hey, so I'm going to log off Twitter for a little while because this was all too much or whatever. And to normalize that kind of thing is so, even coming from someone who is on the road maybe further than other people to being very transparent about that sort of thing, has been so useful and so good, and I hope is helpful for other people to make it very clear that like it's okay. We all have those days, and also it's a pandemic, and also all these other things, and like you don't need reasons, and you can just have a bad day, and that's all fine. And take care of yourselves, and that's what's important. And we'll be here, and we care about you, and all that kind of stuff. Has been weirdly has been very reassuring to all of those like personal hiccups of like, oh God, well, I see that this person is posting all the time, and should I, am I doing enough? And like, this person has been talking to this other person, they've been talking to me. Does that mean that they don't like me? Like all that kind of stuff, people talking about it, and people like, oh yeah, no, I feel that too, right? Like we just did, of being like, oh, a creator on the internet who has some anxiety or depression, especially around the work and their presence online. What? But like knowing that that's the case is, for me, is so meaningful and makes such a huge difference. Just to know that it's okay and it's accepted and it happens and is normal is so useful and so important. And I think that's also, that does tie into, not to immediately brand it too much, but it ties into tabletop role-playing game stuff too, right? Of especially now, but always, but especially now, and talking mostly to you and me who have a degree of platform now, right? Or via network, via podcast, whatever, to also be people who normalize those sort of conversations, not just for mental health purposes, but for gaming purposes, but for asking questions or approaching games differently, and using your platform responsibly to open people's minds to possibility, to other ways of playing, of other ways of interacting with other people. And again, it's been really phenomenal to be in a space where, for the most part, people take that seriously and take that real opportunity to insert positivity and growth and conversation into the world, while also, giving a smack to a Nazi and whatnots in their life all at the same time. Like, I've grown so much as a person because of it.
Yeah, thank you for talking about that. Yeah, really important to do and can't be easy. So thank you ever so much. Do you think if there's anyone watching who's going, oh, I would really like to be a little more open with what's going on with me, a little more honest about my mental health, but I'm nowhere near as comfortable as Nathan, I couldn't talk about it. Would you have a suggestion for like a first step for someone who wants to get comfortable in sharing how they're doing?
Yeah, and obligatory. I am not a therapist. I am not a mental health professional. We'll have it ticker-tapey
across the bottom.
I'm married to a mental health professional, but I am not one. But I think first, the thing that was useful for me, and that's how I will feel comfortable phrasing it, I guess, or approaching it, is it's cliche now, which is good and a bummer, but that it's okay not to be okay, right? Like that classic phrase. I think I have a mug that has it on there somewhere in my home, but knowing that everyone struggles, knowing that it's okay just to feel bad, and it's okay to feel only okay. And if you're not happy with how you feel, or you're worried about how you feel, there are resources out there for you. There are communities out there. And if you want to take those sorts of steps, I definitely encourage you to do it with a professional. Friends are great. friends are important, are so valuable. I mean, I just got done talking about how impactful a community of people are, but friends are also your friends and are not your therapists and are not your like unloading ground for whatever. But finding a professional who suits you and fits you. And I had to go through several therapists to find someone who I clicked with, positive as opposed to the negative experiences that I had. But first one is for me was forgiving myself for feeling bad, right? And for being okay, acknowledging that like, okay, this is just my brain being my brain, and brains are weird sacks of water and electricity and chemicals, and they do weird stuff sometimes. And it makes sense because meat and chemicals and water are weird. But there is help out there. There are so many wonderful places, wonderful individuals who are doing work, and it's difficult because I am in a country at least where those resources are hard, and in a healthcare system that is not, we'll say, friendly to many individuals. But if you aren't in a place right now where you can, talk to a professional or can you do whatever steps you need to take, there are some free resources out there. But also kind of first and foremost of being able to acknowledge that like there are a lot of people struggling, not just right now, but just in life. There are a lot of people who, what you're experiencing is certainly unique to you, but you're not alone in feeling it. And it sucks, and it's not your fault really, it's your responsibility to manage, especially as it affects others. But it's just your life, and it is something that hopefully can be managed if you have the strength and the support and the resources. And it's okay, and you're fine, you're great. You are almost certainly doing better than you think you're doing. And in feeling or thinking any of these things.
Thank you very much. I promise we'll repeat, Nathan is not a therapist, just an excellent, wise human being. I think every time I have hosted Talk Together, the joke has come up that D&D is therapy, but it's not therapy, it's therapy. But yeah,
it is very nice.
It's very nice.
You can work through some stuff for sure.
And I think you're the first person I've heard to talk about how much it can be a force for good, especially when you have a platform for advocacy, and the community that we are lucky enough to have around us is amazing.
Like stellar. It's like, I feel it's like unfair of like how many quality people are around, again, not knowing anyone else's experience, knowing my experience, how many just like incredible, again, not like superhuman, I'm not like putting them up on a pedestal, but like genuine people who, flaws and all, are just free stars, like phenomenal people. They make good stuff, certainly, but are just good souls and good individuals and people who work hard and people who care about important things and do the work to care about important things. Again, is another way that I've learned and grown so much, even in my relatively short time in the space, just seeing how friggin' cool so many of these people are is the best thing.
We are so lucky. I reckon we should have one more question. What do you think?
Yes, perfect.
I'm going to cheat, and I'm not even going to roll the die because I just want to know your advice on this one. You're already in wise advice giving mode. Yes. So I just want to ride that one on through. And yeah, if there was a new player, what advice would you give them?
First, I love new players so much. And like, again, it's weird for me to say because I've been playing with my group for 4 years, and I have not played with a new player in a long time, which is a shame because they're just beautiful, shining stars of potential and of joy, and of new perspectives. But for me, one of my favorite things in all of gaming, not to center it too much on myself, but is that moment where get it, where it clicks that when someone says you can do anything, what that means and what the power of that is. There's just always that little spark of like, oh, and sometimes people use it for evil, certainly, but and chaos and whatever, but when they get it, and it's a person who is looking to have fun, right, and be with their friends and all that kind of stuff, and they get it, that is it's the best, because they don't have any of those preconceived notions of like what is optimal, or they know the genre maybe, but not in the way that someone who's played a zillion campaigns are, right? Where it's like, I'm a paladin, and like, yeah, there's expectations and I'll flip them and blah, blah, blah. But like new player making their own way in the tabletop world is, it's the best. So what I would say, and this is kind of more of something that I also try to demonstrate at the table and reiterate, and it's not something you can just like say out loud and have it work for most people, but it's you can do anything and you're safe to do anything. And what I mean by that is I love goblins as a first enemy. Not necessarily like, again, I'm working certainly very hard to be away from like, yes, and all of the ugly, horrible little creatures are all evil, right? And like that sort of tone, but just in times where I've been able to divorce the mechanics and flavor away from the problematic bits, I love goblins. And the reason why is because they're the perfect first monster, because they have simple mechanics. They also have tactics. They have like, they can disengage and they can hide and they can like interact with the environment in interesting ways that new players don't necessarily think of or like realize. They are cowards, so they won't necessarily, like, they're not looking to kill you necessarily. They might be looking to capture you or whatever, or they'll come and get help or whatever. They have a lot of personality, but also they have weird voices. and I'm not gonna say I have a great goblin voice, but I have an enthusiastic goblin voice, and that is
get to hear a little bit of it.
I've done it on stream, but usually there are a lot of like, rah, 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 what are you doing? Kind of vibes. But I love doing that with new players, because it's like, Nathan just did what? Excuse me? He did what nonsense thing, and everyone was cool with it? Like that was just a thing that happened, and that was good actually. So again, that's kind of what I said was a really distillation of so many things, but that is the thesis I try to bring to my first sessions with new players, is like, there's all sorts of weird things. It's not one thing or the other. It can be anything. You can be anything. You can do anything within reason. I mean, it's like, you get it, but it's also a place where you can try to do these things. Obviously, again, we're all players. We're all trying to have fun, respect the players, etc. But you can do a weird character voice. You can make a weird choice. You can be like, I'm going to go romance that NPC. Like, cool, whatever, man. As long as everyone's, consenting to it, let's friggin' do it, man. Yeah. Let's not it's a weird, unfortunate phrase. Let's get weird with it in that context, but you know what I mean. And that is it's a superpower that you can give to a friend. Isn't that cool? Like you can give them the ability to do anything and let their minds wander and be empowered and feel confident. And isn't that so freaking cool? And what a gift you can give to someone. And that's for me what it all comes down to for a new player.
You are amazing. That is, fantastic. I will clip this when it airs and I will send it to every new player I play with. Be like, this is how awesome you are. Go do the goblin voices.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much, Nathan.
It was wonderful.
An absolute privilege and a joy to talk to you. That is actually about all we have time for. It has flown by.
Absolutely. So this is part 1 of 5, I think you said, right?
Yes, in the Nathan Chronicles, we'll be back.
Ooh, the Nathan autobiography title, the Nathan
Please
Chronicles.
come back. We will miss you if you don't come back. You have to come back at some point.
Easy, done.
But in the meantime, you aren't just sitting around waiting to come and talk to me, sadly.
Not exclusively. I'm not, but I'm not exclusively waiting around.
So please remind us of all the brilliant things you're doing. The mods will pop some links into chat. And mods, if you want to pop the link for the charity that Nathan mentioned earlier as well, that would be great. But Nathan, plug things, please. Tell us where we can find you, your goblin voices, all of your frogs, all of the chaos and brilliance. It's
frog voices, not goblin voices in our particular campaign. Again, I'm the DM for Reckless Attack, 5th edition podcast. You can find most of all the relevant information on recklessattack.com. I won't say too active on Twitter, but we'll say extremely active on Twitter at reckless_attack. We are also sort of on Instagram. We have a Patreon with all sorts of cool bonus content. We are also found everywhere podcasts are, on your Spotify's, on your Podbeans maybe. We also are on YouTube in case that's how you like. We also have a lot of promo clips where we post there in case you want to get kind of a better feel for what our podcast is like. We have a separate playlist where I think there's like 9 or 12 little snippets of our episodes, like a couple minutes long, just so you can get a feel for it. Oh my God, I had so many other things that I wanted to say, and then I got too in the weeds. And we also, one of the favorite things that we're doing this year is we're doing a lot more of these kind of style interviews with people, with creators in the TTRPG space. I don't know, our schedule is a little wonky right now, so I don't know what will be out. But we have a lot of we've published our first one with a member of the community, not just the Reckless Attack podcast. The incredible J and B, the DMs of the Planet Arconic podcast. And it was just like one of the best conversations we've ever had. So check that out. That's also on our main feed. Otherwise, again, the takeaway is like frogs and friendship, man. That's kind of our whole vibe. And alliteration is also our vibe, and puns, also of quality audio and of high tight editing and all kinds of great stuff. Give us a try. You might like us. And if you don't, that's no problem. We're all good. We don't need to hear about it, but we get it. It's not for everyone, but it's for a lot of people, and hopefully it's for you.
Perfect. And I am assuming that all of those links to the different YouTubes and Twitches will have been popping up in the Twitch chat as we go. So do have a click, check them out. Can confirm you will not regret it. Whew. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
And for being part of the show. If you enjoyed us, and as always, even if you didn't, we are streaming Talk Together every Friday from
you can't 6 stop
to 7
us.
PM. We'll do it anyway. And like Nathan says, if you don't enjoy us, that's fine. You don't need to tell us about it.
Yeah, we don't need to hear, but man, care about your day. I'm sure you'll find some great stuff. There's so much stuff out there. It's all great. Ours is great, but differently great, but again, we don't need to hear it. It's fine.
So yes, Talk Together is here on our Twitch channel every Friday, 6 to 7 p.m. GMT. And then we are streaming our D&D games, as always, on Mondays and Tuesdays. This coming week, I believe it is Into the Sunset, the next session of Into the Sunset on Monday, 6 to 9 p.m. GMT. And then on Tuesday, we are back with Warriors of Waterdeep, same time, 6 to 9 p.m. GMT. All of our shows stream at twitch.tv/RollTogetherRPG. There's a YouTube link in chat now for all of our VODs. And don't forget, you can also enjoy us as a podcast. Once again, many thanks to our brilliant D20 Club on Patreon, all of our sponsors and supporters, and just take care of yourselves.
Bye.
Bye.